The EBF Open Forum is a live Bible questions and answers program. What kind of Bible question do you have? What subject is of concern to you? Well, this is a program designed to offer you the opportunity to call in and ask questions or comments relating to the Bible. Our host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann, will respond by going to the Bible, the infallible Word of God. Our program is hosted Monday through Friday from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and each Sunday from 1:30 to 3 p.m. Call our toll-free number at 833-548-0276. Again, that's 833-548-0276. Dial in our meeting ID, which is 872-192-5979 #. Bypass the participant ID by pressing pound. And once you're in, raise your hand to ask your question by pressing *9. When it's your turn to ask your question, dial *6 to unmute yourself. You can also join via Zoom video by going to ebiblefellowship.org and clicking the icon at the top. If you're calling in from another country, on our website, select the toll-free button at the top to find your country's number.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's new open forum program. This evening, we're going to open up the phone lines to take your call, and each person is invited to give us a call. If you have a Bible question or a comment that you would like to make, and I'll try to respond by going to the Bible itself and seeing what we can find by following the biblical methodology for coming to truth. Now, before we begin and before we take the first call, I'd like to mention, in case there's anyone out there who hasn't heard already, that we have a new toll-free direct phone number that you can call. It's a different number. Well, actually, no, that is the number on the screen. That number at the bottom of the screen. That the one you heard announced at the beginning of the program was a different number. But this number, 888-969-9883, will get you a live person. Someone will answer your call and basically forward you into the area where you can ask your question and also give you simple directions on what to do. So you could raise your hand and unmute yourself, those things, and very simple instructions. They'll tell you exactly how to do it. And then you'll be in the area where we're going in order, taking people's calls as they call in and their hand raises. Then we go in order, and we have an hour program, so we'll try to get to as many people as possible. If you're not able to get through this evening, you can call tomorrow night or whatever. So that's one thing I want to announce. Again, the number now is on the screen at the bottom. You can call that at any time and be put into the queue so that we would take your call. The other thing, a couple of announcements besides. One is, Lord willing, E-Bible Fellowship will be airing a new program in January, starting in January 2024, and that's not that far away, really. But in January 2024, we hope to start a new program The name of the program is called Housetops, and it will be similar in format to Family Radio's Echoes program, where we will try to have a different speaker, rotating speaker, on each week. It's once weekly at this time. Of course, down the road, if we were able to find more men, qualified men to teach, then maybe we could expand it. But right now, or beginning in January, it will be once weekly, and we are looking forward to that program. And if you could keep that in prayer for the men who will be speaking, that the Lord might bless their studies, which they would be preparing now. And another announcement concerns Zoom. Lord willing, on September 3rd, September 3rd, I think, is the date. It's the first Sunday in September at 10 o'clock. That's what it's tentatively scheduled for right now. 10 o'clock in the morning, we're going to try something new, and we hope to do it live on Zoom. We will give a short Bible presentation. By short, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And it is intended for people who are in Pakistan who speak the Urdu language. We have a translator who lives in Pakistan who will be with us on that program, and he will translate. Now, the way we're going to do it, it's a study already translated. I'm going to know what the study is, and basically, I'm not going to read it. I'll just kind of quickly go over it from memory, and refresh memory at that time. And then the translator, I'll read it, or I'll speak 2, 3, 4 minutes. And the translator will translate from the copy already that has been translated, and then back to me, back to the translator, back and forth until we complete the study. Again, maybe a 15-minute study, but with translation, it may turn out to be 30 to 40 minutes, something like that. And then after that, we will open up the room for questions from people in Pakistan. We don't know how many people will join in. Our friend in Pakistan seems to think that several will be able to join us, and they're going to try and join us online on Zoom. So from what I understand, it will not just be a group of Pakistanis in one house, but it will be people in their own homes signing on with their own Zoom. I think that's how it's going to work. But this is something, please keep in prayer. This is an area or a direction we can go in that, and keep in mind what I mentioned Sunday concerning a new feature that we have on Zoom, which is at the bottom of the page where it says show captions. And we'll point this out when we have this group of Pakistanis. Show captions, it's at the bottom of everyone's Zoom page, and then you can click your language. So hopefully they'll have Urdu. I don't know. I haven't checked that out. But if Urdu is available, not only will we have a translator, but they can have caption in the Urdu language. So that'll be two things working towards them understanding what's going on. And it, if this does go fairly well, and by fairly well, I would say if we're able to have even a small group, that would be wonderful. Then we can try to do this in other languages that we have translations in, and we have people who are working with eBible to translate. So please keep this in prayer. Again, that would be September 2nd, 10 o'clock in the morning, our time. And from what I understand, Pakistan is 9 hours ahead. So it would be 7 p.m. their time, which is a reasonable time for them. I think in the past we've had people join us from other countries, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. So this is a much better time for them. Okay, that's all the announcements for now. So why don't we begin by going to the first caller. Welcome to our open forum program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hey, Chris, how you doing? Matthew 25, 15 and 16.
Matthew 25, 15. Matthew 25, verse 15. Well, I'll start in verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents.
Chris, my question is, when we call in on a program like this program, are we sharing our talents?
Is the person calling in sharing their talent? Well,
Yes, correct.
When we carefully go over this parable, and there is a similar one in Luke 19, we find a couple of things, and very curious things, and very significant for our time, because here the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, and called his own servants and delivered unto them 10 pounds. But then notice verse 19, after a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And as soon as we read that, well, who is that speaking of? Who is the Lord of the servants? It is Christ. And does the Bible speak of Christ coming? Yes, his second coming. What will happen when he comes? He will reckon with his servants. It's the day of judgment to find out whether we have done good or bad. Remember, that's what's said in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he has done, whether it be good or bad. And over in Luke 19, we again read very similar information in verse 15. And it came to pass that when he was returned, and this is the Lord, or the nobleman, the good nobleman, having received the kingdom, then he commanded these servants to be called unto him, to whom he had given the money, and that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Then came the first, saying, Lord, thy pound has gained 10 pounds. And he said unto him, well, thou good and faithful servant. So again, he's returned, he's received the kingdom, and he is basically reckoning with his servants in judgment day. In judgment day, you can't come to any other conclusion when you read the full parable. It's in the day of judgment, and so that's why it's a little tricky answering your question, because the talents or the pounds, which represent the same thing, they represent the gospel that has been entrusted to those who would say they're the people of God. They proclaim to be the people of God, and some truly are. And in this case, we have an unusual situation, because we have three different people in both parables, and two out of the three are faithful, and it's the one who's not faithful, and it's a reversal on the 1/3, and we could maybe tie that into the judgment on the 1/3 in Revelation 8, because judgment did begin at the house of God and continues on those professed Christians into the day of judgment. But anyway, the pounds were gained, or the talents were earned before the Lord came. So that means the people we're reading about, they're being examined, and their Lord is reckoning if they have been faithful servants with the gospel in the day of salvation. In the day of salvation, what did they do with the gospel? And it of course, it would come down to whether or not they're truly saved. And what we find is the one who had 5 and gained 5 and then had 10 is given an 11th pound or talent. And the one who only had 1 pound and he didn't do anything with it, he wrapped it up and hid it in a napkin, I think it says in let's see, it might, I believe it says that somewhere, and that's also telling, because when we search out that word napkin, I believe it's tied to death, like the napkin upon Christ's body in the tomb. So when someone wraps up their talent or pound in a napkin, it's really an indication they did nothing with it because they're spiritually dead. But in the day of judgment, even that which they had is taken from them. It's taken away, and that's what's given to the one who had 10. And there we find that's what's going on in Judgment Day. It is the process of taking away truth from those who seemingly once possessed it. And, we're aware of this. We're familiar with this. We've seen it right before our eyes as people seemingly understood great amounts of truth. I know people, I thought they understood everything the Lord was opening up. And where are they? Well, all I'll say is they're nowhere to be found, as far as I'm aware. And there's numbers of them that are against many of the things that they they once affirmed and were seemingly giving their lives for, and taking up their cross and using their resources and their time and their effort and putting everything into it, where, wow, you thought the Lord's really working in this person's life, and now they're contrary to these things and against them, and so forth. And not to point any fingers at any individual or try to name anyone, but we can see that here, and this happened after May 21, 2011, the Lord is carrying out what he's doing here. Okay, you servants, what did you do with my pound? And again, this is tied to salvation. So even though someone worked in the gospel, let's say in the true gospel, they went on mission trips, yet it really has to do with their deep down understanding. Did these things enter into them? Did they, did they truly know them from their heart? That's when somebody has 10 pounds or 10 talents or 5 or whatever. And if it didn't truly enter into their heart, then it would be like they had 1. And the things they seemingly once understood are taken from them. And on the other hand, the Bible has revealed to us in this day of judgment of God's plan to bring forth more revelation of his judgment program. The revelation, as it says in Romans 2:5, day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of God. And so we have increased our understanding in this period of time. So when people call, I don't know, a caller could call in and they have an increased understanding. I know a fair number of the calls we receive are of people who, of course, this teaches us we can't really know anyone. God knows the hearts, but from, again, all appearances, it seems people are understanding the things God is doing in this time, and more importantly, they are not going back from them. We're pretty well down that road of the day of judgment. We're more than halfway to what appears to be the end in the year 2033. And there's been a lot of trials and a lot of afflictions and a lot of fire put forth, spiritual flames put forth to each and every one of us. And so at least I would say there can be a little encouragement if we're continuing up until this point. Well, maybe the Lord did save me. Maybe he did save me. So that's basically the only way I think I could answer that. But thank you for calling and sharing. And let's go now to the next person on the phone tonight. Welcome to our new open forum program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hey, Chris, can we read a few verses here? Revelation 5, verses 5.
Revelation 5:5. And one of the elders saith unto me, Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof.
And then the next verse is Proverbs 28, verses 15.
Proverbs 28:15. As a roaring lion and a raging bear, so is a wicked ruler over the poor people.
And then 1 Peter 5:8.
First Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour.
All right, and then one more verse before I get to my question. Jeremiah 2 verses 30.
Jeremiah 2. Verse 30. In vain have I smitten your children. They receive no correction. Your own sword hath devoured your prophets like a destroying lion.
Okay, and then my question is on Daniel 6 verses 24. You don't have to read it, but basically I was trying to figure out who the lions represent in the lion's den. Because I know that you have verses where Christ is represented as a lion, but then you also have verses where Satan. So I was wondering if you could help out with that.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. The timing of it assists us because we know that that Daniel 6 follows Daniel 5. In Daniel 5, Babylon fell. Darius, the king of the Medes and the Persians, takes the kingdom and begins to reign over the kingdom of Babylon. He's actually maybe it's by his other name, Cyrus. He's actually called the king of Babylon in the book of Ezra, and that reference to Cyrus, Darius, king of Babylon, is really a reference to Christ, king of Babylon or king of the world at this time. And so in Daniel 6, we find this king that God calls my anointed, my Messiah, who will build my city and so forth in Isaiah 44 and 45, and who took Babylon in one night. In one night, he came like a thief, and the Babylonians were caught like a thief in the night. And so everything points to him being a picture of Christ ruling the world in chapter 6 in the day of judgment. And yet, under this king, there are still many ruling in Babylon, 120 princes or whatever they're called, and 3 presidents over them, of which Daniel is one. And Daniel is preferred. He is the one the king truly trusts above all. And we can see the relationship between God and his elect who have been left on the earth to go through the judgment. Daniel's still in Babylon. He's still there, even though Babylon has fallen, and even though they've been defeated. And that means the elect are still in the world. Babylon typifies the world, the kingdom of Satan. Even after the world has fallen, even after Satan has been defeated, and even after Christ is reigning on the earth. So I think we can see all that, and so we're still living amongst men of the world. Also, Daniel is still with these men. These are wicked men, the leaders of Babylon over all these provinces. It's a picture of all the nations and all the leaders and all those who rule them. Well, why would Daniel, if he typifies the elect, be counted a prisoner, considered a president, and preferred as one of the best rulers. Are the elect ruling anything today? Well, yes, we are. Know ye not the saints will judge the world? So we judge with Christ. Christ is seated as king. We are in him, and we live and reign with him. Live and reign. To reign as a king is to rule. So if Christ is ruling this world, the elect are ruling with him. And that would be one reason that Daniel is likened to this position of power. Yet in our spiritual rule, of course, there is no favor or preference, and we're still despised by those in the world. We're still we're the outcast, we're the outsider. Everyone, they were all together, all 120 and the other two presidents. They all conspired, and they all came up with an idea that this will be the way to finally get rid of Daniel. And they developed, we'll get the king to sign a law if anyone makes a request of anyone but the king, then he'll be thrown in the lion's den. And of course, there has to be a historical element to this. And I think that law would point to things we can see developing, have seen for a little while now, and probably will continue to see develop as there are laws being enacted in places we never would have thought possible, compelling speech and compelling to get on board with the program, basically the world's program of their new morality. And who knows where that could lead down the road. But anyway, there is the penalty, because the elect cannot and will not serve man and bow the knee to men, and so they will they're cast into the lion's den to suffer the penalty. And the lions, I believe, I think are more of the ungodly. We read of Satan being a roaring lion, going about seeking whom he may devour. But how does he actually accomplish the devouring? How is Satan's presence, this evil, wicked presence, this this pursuit of his carried out in the world? It's through wicked men. It's through wicked men. I think, I don't know if I can remember the verse, but I think it might be in Psalm 22, where God is speaking of Christ on the cross, and we read in Psalm 22. Well, there's reference to the dog. I thought there was a reference to the lions here. Yeah. Fortunately, I can't find it. Yeah, well, I'll try to look for that another time. But
Okay.
it sounds. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering, because the lions end up destroying the men who had Daniel thrown into the den. And I thought that verse in Jeremiah was kind of interesting, because it says, your own sword hath devoured your prophets like a destroying lion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I was wondering,
was that chapter 3?
chapter 2, verses 30.
Chapter 2, 30.
Yeah.
In
Now, if I was
vain,
wondering, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to read it again. In vain have I smitten your children, they receive no correction. Your own sword has devoured your prophets like a destroying lion. Yeah, that's Satan, who comes against the churches and congregations, and he's the lion, but he uses his emissaries who are in lockstep with him, and so they turn out to be lions. That's basically the idea I was getting at.
Oh, okay, because I was wondering if because the lions destroy the wicked men that throw them in. So is that like a picture of the wicked destroying the wicked? Um,
Well, no, that was the burning fiery furnace.
no, I
But
mean, remember how Cyrus had the men who accused Daniel? He had them thrown into the den
yeah, at the end,
at the end.
once Daniel successfully went through the night in the lion's den, and that would point to the elect believers successfully going through Judgment Day and coming out at the end. And as Daniel said, the innocency is found in my hands. I have done thee no hurt, and that is God finding the elect without fault, without sin of any kind, because we're actually going through a demonstration. All of our sin has already been paid for by Christ at the foundation of the world, and at the last day, we'll be lifted up out of what is turned into a lion's den, just another figure of speech, or hell. The nations turned into hell will be lifted up, pronounced innocent. I find no fault in them, and then forever be with the Lord.
I just did have one last thing. So I was talking this over with another listener, and he thought the lions could also potentially represent Christ, because it's God during a period of God's wrath, and he has the angel shut the lion's mouth, but then the lions also destroy the wicked. So could that be Christ? Where we're
Yeah,
not subject to his wrath?
yeah. Well, that is very possible. That's very possible. And we know that the Lord is behind even Satan's activities. So yes, I think that is possible. Excuse me, I have some bugs assailing me. They're attacking me. But that's possible. I'll try to maybe more solidly see if I can understand that in the future. But thank you for calling and sharing. And let's go now to the next person on the phone. Welcome to our question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. Oh, could you please read Daniel 3:29 and 30?
Okay, Daniel 3. (29). Therefore, I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort than the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
My question was, if you could please explain promoted in the province of Babylon, how it could be understood presently. I don't know if you answered that just now.
Well, yeah, this is one of the most unusual promotions, job promotions anyone ever had. These three young men were commanded to bow down, and they were commanded to bow down to a golden image King Nebuchadnezzar had set up at the sounding of these musical instruments. Now, we're helped in a couple of different ways in understanding the time frame spiritually, which time and seasons in view. One way is the musical instruments. They're mentioned 4 different times in the chapter, at the sound of the sackbut, psaltery, flute, harp, and so forth. And in 3 of the references, 6 instruments are mentioned. In the other reference, the 4th, only 5 instruments are mentioned. And okay, somebody might say, so what? Well, yeah, but this is the Bible. God does things like that intentionally with definite purpose. Why not name all 6 each time? And then you would have 24. Why hold back one reference or one reference of one musical instrument? And the answer is because God wants to highlight the number 23 and hide it. And I mean, it's not very obvious. You have to very carefully read and even count the musical instruments, but we've learned, God does this in many places with numbering of men. In Nehemiah chapter 8, we read God tells us the names of a whole bunch of men, and then he says it was during the Feast of Tabernacles, and he says they caused the people to understand the Bible reading. They caused them to understand. And we know that at the time of the end, it's God the Holy Spirit who causes his people to understand. And the spiritual Feast of Tabernacles, which could be called the Feast of the Bible. And then when you go back and you count the number of men, you find there's 13 men. And again, why not 9 men, 15 men, 37 men? No, 13, because it's emphasis on that number. After 13,000 years of history, God opens up the word, takes the seals off the word, causing his people to understand the scriptures. And same here, the number 23, the lack of that one instrument gives us the number 23 to direct us to tribulation. And then when we see that this image of the beast, this great image set up by King Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar is a type of Satan, a spiritual picture of Satan, we can tie it in to Revelation 13, where we read of an image that is set up once the beast comes up out of the sea, and the beast is the type of Satan. And when is Satan loosed? At the end of the church age, after 13,000 years, that number 13, and then judgment begins at the church for 23 years. That's the tie-in with the 23 musical instruments. And in Revelation 13, we read of this image. It says in verse 14, and deceiveth them that dwell in the earth by the means of those miracles or wonders which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell in the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, and the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Identical to the command in Daniel 3. Once Nebuchadnezzar set up that image, everyone through the blowing or the playing of the musical instruments was to bow down to the image of Nebuchadnezzar, to the image he had set up. And And if you did not, you would be thrown into a burning fiery furnace. You'd be killed. It is spiritually equivalent to Revelation 13. And the image of the beast spoken of in Revelation 13 is said to be alive and able to speak because it's telling us about the corporate church. Once Satan was loosed and entered into the churches and took his seat ruling over them, like King Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judah, and Judah became subject to him. Once that happened, then the church took on the image of Satan, and yet it remained, as they like to say, a living organism. It's made up of people, and it had life in that sense and could speak. Every Sunday, the pastors get up into the pulpit. Unfortunately, they're emissaries of Satan since God ended the church age. And so that was the test for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Will you serve my gods? Will you bow down to the image I have set up? Same test in the church. Will you submit to the authority of Satan? Will you submit to these false gospels and lies? And will you remain within the churches and congregations and basically serve Satan? And unfortunately, that was the testing ground as God separated wheat from tares, and great numbers of professed Christians in the churches remain behind. I don't think many of them understood, consciously what they were doing, but spiritually, it was exactly what they were doing. They were bending the knee to the idol that Satan had set up and submitting to that. And yet God's elect cannot do that because of God's Spirit within them, moving them to will and to do of God's good pleasure, and not to serve Satan in any way. Or we follow the truth. We cannot follow the lie. And so these young men, even at the point of death, they said, okay, you may throw us into the burning fiery furnace, O king, but we will not bow down and serve your image. And that's when Nebuchadnezzar got so furious, and he did throw them into the fire. Now, that is a picture of Satan trying to act as God, because it's God normally who burns people up. The language of the Bible, God is a consuming fire. He's trying to act as God, and he's taken his seat in the church. 2 Thessalonians 2 tells us the man of sin takes his seat, showing himself he is God. So he pronounces the judgment, burn these men up. And that would spiritually work itself out to the edicts, the bulls, the condemnations of the churches against God's people, against the true gospel of the Bible that they carried, and labeling them as heretics and Campingites and so forth. That all that he could do, yet it didn't harm us at all, did it? It didn't hurt anyone that bishops or priests or pastors or elders or whoever in the church, or in all of them combined, thought we were a heretic and thought this and thought that. It did not harm a single elect child of God, and we were unscathed. Christ protected us, and now the curious thing is what happens afterward, because Nebuchadnezzar looks into the fire historically. This was true history. And he sees these men walking around, and also a fourth man that he says is like unto the Son of God. And of course, that is indicating Christ was with his people in the flames, protecting them historically. Miraculously, God has power over all elements. He can walk on water. And he even caused Peter to walk on water for a short while, so that the natural, sinking into its depths did not happen. And he can cause fire not to burn if he so wills. God is mighty God. Of course, that was all during the time the Bible was being compiled, and God was operating supernaturally to do these kinds of things. Nobody put to fire after the Bible has been completed should expect to be supernaturally delivered. None of the saints delivered to the stakes, the burning stakes, were delivered that way. No, they literally burned up, but that's okay, because spiritually nothing touched their soul. Satan could not touch their soul. The powers of this world could not touch their soul. And so historically, Nebuchadnezzar is, of course, he's amazed. How could this be? And he promotes them. I think he's dumbfounded. They have gone against the king's word, risking their lives, and they defeated the flames, a cruel, horrible punishment, and they submitted to it, and they were victorious over it. So you got to put yourself in this evil king's position. What's he going to do now? What's he going to do now? That's about as worse as you could do to someone. That's about as bad as anything, to heat the furnace 7 times more than it's wont to be heated, to burn them up into the tiniest of ashes, and they walk out without a singe. He didn't want to look like an even greater fool and say, no, grab these men and go try to execute them another way. And so I don't know. He was just stunned, and so he promoted them, gave them more authority in the province of Babylon. And what does that mean spiritually? I'm not too sure. It would have to do with the Great Tribulation, and Babylon is the world, because Daniel and those 3 young men, they've been taken out of Judah, so they've already left the church. Although there's elements of the church pronouncing bulls and edicts with this condemnation, yet it could just be that now they have, as we did, we had much leeway in the days leading up to May 21, 2011, in sharing the gospel. We had tremendous leeway. God was opening up doors all over the earth in incredible ways. And he was doing so for his elect that those 3 young men typified. Maybe there's some relationship there. But thank you for that good question. And let's go now to the next caller. Welcome to our program. Please go ahead with your call.
I need you to read Romans chapter 12, verse 19.
Romans 12:19. Let's see. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord.
Now, I just want to use a quick example before I ask my question. Let's say you own a car and somebody finds out that you believe in the Bible and they break all the windows and they flatten the tires and they dent the car up. And then you say to yourself, I know what I'll do. I'll go to his house and do the same thing. Now, this verse says, don't do that. It says, I will repay. I will get revenge. The Lord says he will repay and get vengeance. Now, my question is, where and when to do that? Where and when does he do that?
Well, yeah, that's what is meant by avenge not yourselves, but give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord.
Right. So when
The
does he do
place
that? Yeah.
is on earth, and the time is right now. This is significant. I will repay. We've learned that God's end time judgment program is twofold. First, judgment begins at the house of God. That's called the Great Tribulation, followed by judgment on the world, which is also a tribulation. And this tribulation is called a recompense or a repayment. If we go to Second Thessalonians chapter 1, Second Thessalonians 1, it says in verse 6, seeing it is a righteous thing with God to recompense. Can we mute the caller? We're getting some feedback. Seeing it is a righteous thing with God to recompense tribulation to them that trouble you, and to you who are troubled, rest with us when the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels in flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not God and that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. You see, verse 6, righteous thing with God to recompense tribulation to those that trouble you. And then Christ, next thing we read, Christ in flaming fire taking vengeance. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Christ is the Lord. The day of vengeance has come. That's what Judgment Day is. And God is recompensing, he is repaying those that have offended his people, and especially it's a repayment of tribulation, because we have to understand that in the first tribulation, called the Great Tribulation, Satan and his forces that are pictured as Gog and Magog, or Satan and the Gentiles, the nations, they came against the house of God, or they came against the camp of the saints, the people of God, and brought tribulation. They brought the judgment of God, and they just caused utter destruction. They ridiculed and reviled and mocked and destroyed the true gospel of the Bible, and brought shame to the name of Christ and Christian within the churches and congregations. And that went on for a full 23 years of this terrible tribulation. Then on May 21, 2011, which was the 8400th day, the 23rd year completed, then God turned things around and brought recompense upon Babylon, upon the king of Babylon, or upon Satan in this world, Satan and the nations, the unsaved. And that's what's going on now as God is bringing mockery, ridicule, shame, public humiliation to the nations. That's what we're reading or hearing reports of in newspapers or wherever people are getting their news on a practically daily basis. We're hearing of things bringing shame to this particular world institution and that world institution. Lately, the focus has been on the justice system of, the United States, because the United States has been world renowned for a long time as a place of honorable justice, of right justice, where people could come, people could flee all over the world. Their lands of injustice in communism and dictators and people have sought refuge to come to the land where they could find honorable justice. And yet we know, really, because all nations are made of men and all men are unjust. Deep down, that they have no true sense of justice, and because they do not have relationship with God, and they do not recognize the law of God as right and true and faithful and just. And so God, in this day of judgment, is exposing the fact that men are naturally of themselves unjust, and this is their world. And so when it comes to a nation that has been held up as an example of justice, well, now God is revealing, no, things are not as just as you might think. There is a definite predisposition. There is prejudging and biases, and it is a public shaming of the country that is held up as the model of justice in the world. So if that country is being publicly humiliated and ridiculed and brought to shame, what does that say about the whole rest of the world and their systems of justice? And that is what God has been doing for several years now. He has spent a good deal of time ridiculing the scientific community or the world's institution of science that has been lifted up and promoted, and scientists have been exalted. Trust the science has been a refrain. And now people mockingly will say that. Mockingly, they'll say, trust the science, because people do not trust it anymore. They know that there is lying involved in the science. It is not as it was presented. It is not objective, really, in many ways deep down. And you see, this is all part, Mr. Camping was on to something. He had the right idea when he was saying that over the course of the 5 months, God would expose the dead bodies of men, and that would be a public shaming. It would bring public humiliation. Remember how he went into some detail talking about shame and humiliation as an element of God's judgment. Well, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when you hear people shaming, mocking, ridiculing, not the church, well, still the church, of course, and still religion, because that's part of the world. The church was overtaken, so there will still be some of that. But for the Great Tribulation, it was concentrated on the church. And there's been nothing like this in my lifetime, and I'm sure even going back much longer than that, where the news media has become a mockery, science has become a mockery, the idea of justice has become a mockery, and on and on. The educational system has become a mockery. That when you have so-called trained biologists and they refuse to tell you what a woman is. You see, why are these things happening? How could these things possibly be happening and happening pretty much all at the same time? Only one answer. The judgment of God is not always seen in the shutting down of the world with a virus, although I think God made himself known for 2 or 3 years by doing that. But look at what's happening with the world's institutions, and all this has never been the case, as far as I'm aware, that distrust and the mockery of them. That it's very, very similar. What it is a recompense. It's a repayment, because the world mocked the people of God when they should not have, when, yes, God was judging them, but it didn't give anyone license to mock them at all, because they were once God's anointed, like King Saul, and yet they spent years doing this because God had abandoned them, and now God has turned the tables. But thank you for calling and sharing. We have come to the end of our program, unfortunately. Lord willing. Oh, this is important. I forgot to mention, tomorrow, Wednesday, and this is part of our new schedule, the open forum, this program will be at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. 12 p.m. tomorrow. We hope you can join us then. But for now, we have come to the end of our time. Would like to thank everyone for joining us, whether you're listening at home or if you had a chance to call in. May you have a good night, and may the Lord's perfect will be done.
Thanks again for joining us for eBible Fellowship's live open forum program.